Well, I'm back with Michael Sonnenschein from Grayscale, the CEO. Michael,
Yep.
you want to tell us about yourself and your company?
First of all, thank you for having me, Michael, and thank you for this event. This is fantastic. It is a pleasure to speak to all of you. As Michael mentioned, I'm CEO of Grayscale Investments. We are the world's largest digital currency asset management business, topping at right about $30 billion of assets under management. Our business dates back to 2013 when we launched our very first investment product, which is still today our flagship offering, which is called Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. It is a long-only passively managed Bitcoin investment product, and today is the world's largest Bitcoin investment product. You know, I think if we look back to late 2013, our founder, a gentleman named Barry Silbert, was early to realize that investors of all shapes and sizes, individuals, high net worth individuals, family offices, hedge funds, pensions, endowments, and now certainly corporations would want to have exposure to digital assets. But back then, and largely still today, they exist outside of the traditional places where investment allocations are being made, where investors are typically accessing stocks, bonds, ETFs, whatever it may be. And to address that head on, we decided to launch a whole family of investment products that would give investors secure, compliant, regulated exposure to the digital currency space. And so today that has expanded now into a family of 9 investment products. So 8 of them are single currency products. And our last product is a diversified basket of large cap digital assets. And so I think where we've had a lot of success over the years amassing AUM is that, number one, most investors, whether you're a high net worth individual, a family office, a hedge fund, pension, corporation, is used to relying on other folks to handle investments for them. They buy a stock, they buy an ETF, they buy some treasuries. It is going to settle and work through a custodian or a prime broker, et cetera. And so by having these solutions available to investors, we've given them a really compliant way to do that. Not to mention that if you don't feel comfortable or don't have the technological wherewithal to handle digital currencies directly, or your mandate doesn't allow you to directly have a bearer instrument in your control, the Grayscale family of products is a really easy way to gain digital currency exposure.
Okay, so we've got a lot of corporations online, and corporations have special interests, and they're all interested in Bitcoin. How do they get plugged into Bitcoin? So I guess, can you go into more detail on the kinds of Bitcoin related products or services you would offer to a corporation?
Sure. So Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is our long-only Bitcoin product. It is purely Bitcoin exposure, just beta exposure, no cash, no leverage, no trading, no arbitrage, no rehypothecation of the underlying coins. A corporation could come to Grayscale on any day it wishes and subscribe into the fund at net asset value, and that would be giving them just directionally long Bitcoin exposure, and they'd be buying an investment. It has a QSIP, it's audited, financial statements, has an offering memorandum, risk disclosures, you're signing a subscription agreement. And actually, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is the first and only SEC reporting company that is a digital currency investment product. So a lot of investors, look to this product because they enjoy those additional protections of SEC reporting, 8Ks, 10Ks, 10Qs, et cetera. Now, if a corporation comes to us and says, we'd like to put $50 million into Bitcoin, or maybe a little more like they did with, like you guys did, Michael, at MicroStrategy, we are actually going out into the market and buying as much Bitcoin for as much money is being deployed into the fund. It's completely one for one. There's nothing synthetic about it. And we'll be issuing newly issued shares of the fund. So our AUM would grow by that $50 million. We'd have sourced $50 million worth of Bitcoin. And now that investor is able to have that directionally long exposure. What we've done, rather than offering a traditional redemption program with a certain frequency, is instead gotten this product to trade on the public markets. So Grayscale Bitcoin Trust trades on the OTCQX market here in the US, where many ADRs trade, Volkswagen, Roche, Adidas, et cetera, under the symbol GBTC. And so once you have passed the statutory holding period for those newly created shares, which is only 6 months, you are then eligible to sell those shares out into the public market if you wish at any point past that 6-month time horizon. And that's how you get liquidity on your investment.
Okay. So there's a lot of increase in corporate interest over the past year. You're kind of in a unique situation because you have probably the biggest institutional business in the world. I guess everybody would be interested in hearing about your customer base and your especially corporate clients. Do you have any reference customers, and what kind of business are they doing with you?
Sure. So number one, we take the confidentiality of our clients exceedingly, to heart. So we do not disclose who our clients are other than those who have public reporting obligations. So there are certainly investors who own shares of this product that have to file 13Ds and 13Fs, et cetera, disclosing their holdings with us. And those are certainly widely available. That being said, I would say if I look back at 2020, greater than 85% of the $5.7 billion we raised last year came from institutional investors. Now, a lot of that institutional client base was hedge funds, but certainly over the course of the year, as we started to see, folks like MicroStrategy and Square and others really be the pioneers that have really now provided air cover for other corporate participation in this asset class, we've started to really have really good dialogues and starting to get allocations both from corporate clients, as well as we've started to see the conversation become a lot more actionable from the pension and endowment space. Although I would disclaim that on the pension and endowment front, it's coming a little bit more so outside the US than it is from within the US, which is just an interesting anecdote. So yeah, very, very heavily skewed institutional base.
Yeah, it makes so much sense for pensions and endowments. And I guess it makes even a lot more sense if you're a pension and endowment in Europe and interest rates are negative. That might be part of that boost.
Indeed.
Okay, so everybody wants to know where's Grayscale licensed and what jurisdictions do you do business in?
Sure. We do business globally. Grayscale sells its investment products through our sister firm, Genesis. You all just heard from my colleague, Mike Morrow. So we sell our securities through a registered broker-dealer, the Genesis Trading Broker-Dealer. Genesis also acts as the authorized participant. So they are a regulated broker-dealer with a BIT license. So any of the underlying tokens being purchased to satisfy investment coming into any of the Grayscale products is solely being sourced through Genesis. And again, given their status, they have to source their tokens from counterparties that meet those AML KYC obligations as a broker-dealer. In addition to that, Grayscale is audited. We work with a company called Friedman. And then in the case of Grayscale Bitcoin Trust and the Grayscale Ethereum Trust, these are SEC reporting companies. So I know that this sounds at times almost like, well, that's not such a big deal. A lot of things are SEC reporting. What's such a big deal about this is the fact that Grayscale Bitcoin Trust goes all the way back to 2013, and we were able to work with the SEC to help them understand every aspect of the product, the service providers, the risk factors, the operations of the product, how fair valuation is done, every aspect that goes into running this product in order to get them comfortable. We elected to become an SEC reporting company and to hold ourselves to that higher standard, because that's what honestly we felt investors wanted and quite frankly deserved. And so in terms of being an SEC reporting company, you don't see that being a newsmaker often, because most of the time, any product or company that goes public on NYSE or NASDAQ, et cetera, is from day one an SEC reporting company. we trading on the OTC markets were having to report under the alternative reporting standards and have now elected to hold ourselves to a higher standard, being SEC reporting.
You know, I can empathize with you on that because we've been a public company for 22 years, and people used to say to me, isn't it a drag to be public and have to file quarterly reports? And wouldn't you rather just go private? And I said, you know, in retrospect, being a public company and going through that SEC reporting process, it makes you a better company because
internal
you
controls,
have more
all those
discipline.
things. Yeah, of course.
You know, it's having that kind of discipline forces you to not put things off, and there's more rigor, and ultimately over the long run, I think it makes you a better firm.
It's been a significant investment, headcount, processes, internal controls, committees, you know, all of the things that go into staying in compliance with that has been a welcome challenge and something that has honestly also benefited us by opening up our investor base. A lot of investors are looking for that to be built in, particularly when they're going into an asset class they haven't invested in before.
Yeah, it's the gold standard for counterparty trust in the world. I mean, everywhere in the world, really. Okay, so what's the typical customer journey for a corporation that decides to do business with your firm?
So I'd say nowadays, 95% of those types of clients are going into Bitcoin only. These are typically folks that have said, you know, Bitcoin is where I'm most comfortable. I've done the most homework, the most research. That's where the most resources are available to me. And if I'm going to do anything in crypto, it's going to be in Bitcoin, into the most notable and widest of digital currencies out there. There has, however, been an uptick in a different conversation, which is there is a growing appreciation that the asset class is more than just Bitcoin, and this idea that folks should be allocating. And so we've started to see an uptick in our diversified fund, which is market cap weighted. So it obviously does skew quite heavily to Bitcoin, but then also it lets investors gain exposure to Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash. And so I would say, if you asked me this question about 18 months ago, a lot of these conversations still included Bitcoin 101 and 201. How are we going to know there's only 21 million? The divisibility of Bitcoin, who created it? Where did it come from? A lot of those conversations also used to include regulatory considerations and there being discomfort that there wasn't enough regulatory clarity to meaningfully move into the space. None of that is part of the conversation anymore. Today's conversations are us facing off initially with investors being as well versed as we've ever seen them before. We're having conversations around portfolio construction. Where does this fit within their portfolios? You know, Michael, we've certainly been a big proponent of seeing investors rotate out of assets like gold, historical stores of value, antiquated stores of value, and into assets like Bitcoin. We've seen investors allocate thinking about this, you know, certainly at the riskiest end of their portfolio spectrum, maybe more akin to an early stage technology investment or venture capital. So we do a lot of conversation around portfolio construction as well as portfolio sizing. On the conservative end of the spectrum, we're seeing maybe 25 to 50 basis points of exposure. And over time, we're seeing some investors get as high as 400 or 500 basis points of exposure. And I think whereas these conversations were once characterized by volatility and that being a deterrent or a hesitation, you know, when I think back to March of 2020, when COVID brought the world to a grinding halt and crypto fell precipitously, even more so than a lot of other asset classes, that type of day is the day that investors are calling us up, trying to invest quickly and trying to take advantage of pullbacks in those prices, not calls characterized by, you know, how could I have done this? This is a bad investment, et cetera. And so we've seen very consistently investors using pullbacks in price to opportunistically average down. And then I think the other part of the conversation that we have with folks today, because today people really are generally coming to us or engaging with us with high intention. It's about timing and both the timing for making investment, as well as the overall time of how long they should be thinking about this investment. Typically, depending on investors' order size or how much of an allocation they want, we work with them to design a program that puts them into the trade over a series of days or weeks or months, depending on what it is. And then thinking about the time horizon, these are investors that are putting this capital to work for, call it at a minimum, the next 5 to 10 years, and in some cases, much further out on the calendar than that.
So I guess that leads to the next logical question, which is, if people are taking a longer time horizon view, what's your outlook for the Bitcoin marketplace over the coming 1, 2, 3, 4 years?
I think that if you are a corporation listening to this and you kind of looked at Bitcoin in 2017 and you're looking at Bitcoin again now, I cannot stress to you enough how different the market dynamic is today than it was 3 years ago when we had our last digital asset Bitcoin rally. Today, you have seen the development of derivatives. You've seen a much healthier two-sided market, a much more global market. The build out of infrastructure, the picks and the shovels of this industry, exchanges, AML, KYC, order management systems, tax law, accounting, reporting systems. I mean, you have to remember that digital assets came along like Bitcoin, and many systems that exist today don't account for something that has 8 decimal places. So there's been a lot of catch up being played in and around this industry. And when you have, I think, essentially unlimited or perpetual fiscal stimulus being injected into our system, investors are increasingly looking to scarce assets, verifiably scarce assets like Bitcoin. You have folks like my friend Michael Saylor getting into Bitcoin, alongside some other really notable folks who have long been Bitcoin curious or Bitcoin participants, but have been much more quiet about their participation in the space. The likes of Square and MicroStrategy and Paul Tudor Jones and Druckenmiller and all of these advocates getting into the space, not to mention PayPal and a lot of the other financial services incumbents, are creating a lot more air cover for folks to participate. And I think that we are now on the precipice when you combine that with that very, very large kind of anti-Wall Street sentiment that is out there now, a lot more participation coming into the market. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a very simple asset to value. The supply is known and predictable. And so the price for Bitcoin really is a function of demand. And investors today are allocating to Bitcoin because they believe they're buying a piece of something that they know is verifiably scarce, of which the demand for it is only going to go up over time.
So for the companies that are watching right now, that are interested in integrating Bitcoin into their P&L or into their balance sheet, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, I think the first piece is education, and it's events like this, Michael, that really do that. I know you and I have spent time talking about what it took to kind of, convince your peers at MicroStrategy that this was the right move for you and your investors. And education is the biggest piece of it. In having been a former banker myself and been in the space for the past 7 years, I have not found a single person who's actually, and I really do mean actually, done the homework to dig in on this asset class who has not come out on the other side of that exercise completely amazed. And it is always the folks that balk at this or are naysayers who really have not spent the time looking at this, look at the history of money, look at what inflation has been, not only in the US, but all over the world. And so education is a key component of it. And certainly my team and myself individually are here to help. We've written a ridiculous amount around portfolio construction, valuation, primers. We do teach-ins, roundtables constantly with corporations and other types of investors to get folks comfortable. So education is the first piece of it. And then I think the other piece of it is really kind of shrugging off this idea of timing. I have been fortunate to deal with some of the world's most notable and successful investors, and I have never, and I mean never, seen someone successfully time their entrance into Bitcoin. And so I always tell folks, you either decide you want the exposure or you don't, and you want to get up to a certain size, and you can do that programmatically. But you should be thinking about this over a longer time horizon. And ultimately, the difference of buying more exposure 5% higher or 5% lower or 10% higher, 10% lower is ultimately not going to be a material driver if Bitcoin is able to do all the things that we think it's going to do and take share of all the markets that I'm so excited about. And certainly I know, Michael, you're excited about as well.
Yeah, well, I agree 100% with you on that. I like things where you think it's a trend for the next decade, and it doesn't matter whether you bought in year 1.1 or 1.4 of the trend, or 2.1 versus 2.37. If it was only going to be good for 6 weeks, I don't think I would have that much conviction to begin with.
Absolutely. And I listen, I put my money where my mouth is. I buy more Bitcoin 365 days a year. I've never sold any Bitcoin. I believe that this is the next stop in the evolution of money.
Okay, you and me both. Okay, next question. Well, how do you compare Grayscale to other firms in this space? You know, you have a particular specialty?
I think for Grayscale, we had a probably unfair competitive advantage in that we and Genesis were incubated underneath the same parent organization. And so our businesses have grown very cohesively together over time. And so what Grayscale, I think, has that a lot of other folks have, and just to be clear, Michael, anybody else in this industry offering any products or services that even remotely resemble what we're doing, we do not look at them as competitors. We look at them as helping to grow the pie together. We cannot be the only firm out there trying to convince folks to look at this asset class and help educate them about it. But Grayscale is far and away the largest of the firms out there offering these types of products and services. We have the longest track record of anyone. And I would say on top of that, we're probably the most regulated and most scrutinized, both because of our size and our track record of any firm out there. And so as folks are thinking about regulated counterparties, regulated partners where they can gain exposure to this asset class or get a good source of knowledge, don't look anywhere else.
Okay. Okay, how about take me to the future? What are your plans for the future, your products, and what's your vision for the firm?
So I think at the moment, we're really focusing on 3 areas. We're focusing on scaling, so scaling our operation. And I think that means investing in people. Our headcount has tripled from this time last year. So really ensuring that we're staying ahead of the demands that investors are asking of the firm and that we're adequately prepared for it. And alongside that is technology, making sure people have a top-notch experience when they do interact with Grayscale or Grayscale products. We're certainly expanding the product suite. We have 9 products today. Grayscale will certainly be launching more products throughout 2021. So you'll all have to stay tuned for what those products are. And then I think 3, certainly I'm sure this is a crowd that watches CNBC and other financial and kind of political news. We're really investing in our brand. We're gearing up to launch our 4th national advertising campaign. You've no doubt probably seen Grayscale commercials running on CNBC and elsewhere. And so really thinking about partnerships and sponsorships and really trying to ensure that we're always moving towards that North Star, which is making digital currency investing synonymous with Grayscale.
Awesome. Look, Michael, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
All the best.
You too.